what happens when the person you were thought to be doesn't exist anymore, but no one told you who you're meant to become? This episode isn't about fixing anything, it's about noticing something quietly unraveling beneath the surface. The slow disappearance of an identity. Not the toxic version, not the patriarchal strongman, but the ordinary emotional complex man who's unsure where they fit in anymore. And we live in a culture where masculinity is constantly being revised. We're told, be strong, but not too strong. Lead, but don't dominate. Provide, but don't make it about power. Open up, but don't overwhelm. And it's like being asked to walk a tightrope during an earthquake. Some may freeze, others perform, while many disappear, emotionally, relationally, even existentially. And when they do, we often label them as emotionally unavailable. But what if it's not avoidance? What if it's protection, an armor, a trauma response, a quiet strategy for surviving in a world that punishes softness? The thing is, I've sat with men who carry pain like this, like bricks in their chest, but can't find the words to name them. Not because they lack the will, but because somewhere along the way they were taught that silence is safer than exposure. And maybe they're not wrong. Because you see, many have opened up only to feel rejected, mocked, or used. So now they sit behind locked emotional doors, not because they don't feel, but because feeling has a cost they can't always afford. And for many, the cultural landscape has shifted too. What felt like familiar road signs have been taken down, where the map they were used to no longer fits the landscape. What once seemed clear, who to be, how to act, where to stand, now all is blurred. And somewhere inside, they're wondering, well, what is my place now? As a man who wants to do good without being seen as dangerous by default. And all it seems to be is that they're met with constant criticism, confusion, and at times a deep-rooted shame. Shame for harm done in their name. Shame for being associated with systems they didn't create, yet are still perceived to benefit from. And when a man dares to be vulnerable, genuinely, sincerely, he still risks being misunderstood, distrusted, or discarded. He begins to question himself. Questions like, am I being emotionally careful or emotionally absent? Is silence a boundary or a shutdown? Is my sincerity enough, or will it always be second guessed? Now, these aren't declarations, but they are questions that come up, that rise up in the bodies of many. They, however, rarely make it into the public eye, but they live in private spaces, late night conversations behind closed doors. As a male therapist entering a field like psychotherapy, that dissonance can become even more pronounced. You walk into rooms where you're not unwelcome, but where your presence feels perhaps unexpected. You are surrounded by people, brilliant, empathetic, courageous people, and quietly wonder to yourself, do I belong? You become hyper aware of your tone, your posture, your gaze. You monitor how much space you take up physically and emotionally as a man. The presence of men in these spaces can feel both welcomed, yet watched, curious, yet confronting, necessary, but occasionally misunderstood. And you notice dynamic shifts in subtle ways. And you have to listen with care. You tread lightly, not out of fear, but out of a deep respect for what these spaces have carried and continue to carry. And in your own private process, you question, is my presence helpful? Or is it intrusive? Am I trusted or simply tolerated? Am I bringing something of value? Or am I the embodiment of what others have survived? And in the therapy room itself, it gets even more complex. Sometimes your maleness is exactly what a client needs to heal. Other times it's a symbol of everything they've fled. But you must hold the space for both. Without ego, without flinching, but with positive unconditional positive regard, non judgment, congruency, and empathy. And then some days it aches because when you show up with integrity only to be still viewed through the lens of what other men have done, you are in a sense walking a line between being present and being almost invisible. Not out of shame, but out of care. But we don't talk about that emotional toll that it takes, the subtle self erasure, the overcorrection, the fear of being misread, even when your intentions are pure. Because even when good people, the ones who've done the work, who listen, who feel, who take responsibility, they can still get affected. And they learn over time to stay a little smaller, to keep a part of themselves back, to avoid giving the wrong impression or to be misunderstood. And yet, still underneath it all is that same quiet ache, the kind that says, see me. Not who you think I am, not who history says I might be. Just see me. Now, many men aren't looking to reclaim control or dominance or authority or anything of that kind for that matter. They're just trying not to disappear. Not to be feared, not to be fixed, but to be just held in the complexity of who they're trying to be or becoming for that matter. I don't know, in truth, maybe this episode isn't about men, but maybe it's about the slow, painful shedding of roles we were never meant to carry forever. Perhaps it's the vulnerable, often disorientating act of trying to belong to ourselves, again, without a map. So where do we go from here? Well, maybe we don't. Maybe we just stop and observe and notice. Maybe that's the beginning of learning to sit in the tension of being soft in a world that calls it weak, of being male in a room that once felt unsafe because of other men and their actions, of being unsure but staying anyway. And maybe this new masculinity in inverted commas doesn't arrive with declarations. Maybe it grows slowly like roots in quiet places, between conversations, in the bravery of not knowing, in the bravery of the uncertainty. You don't have to be loud to belong. You don't have to be fixed to be worthy of love. And maybe there is no bow tie on this one, but maybe if you've ever felt lost in translation between who you were told to be and who you are now, might it be that we're not alone in that quiet ache? And so for me, the purpose of the Hurt Lab here is to not give advice, not diagnose, not to position myself as some kind of leader in identity politics. It's not even to offer truths, but it's to create a space where difficult feelings are named, where ideas are gently explored, where you, the listener, feels perhaps a little less alone in what maybe cannot be articulated, but where hurt is acknowledged and made human again. As for my role as the host of the Hurt Lab, I'm not an expert in masculinity. I'm not an expert in cultural commentary. I am a psychotherapist and I'm not here to dispense solutions, but to invite reflection, to pose curiosities, to pause and reflect, to sit beside you, the listener, to afford you a place, perhaps to allow you to tune into feelings that may have been buried or ignored or have never had a platform before. So understand, I'm not declaring what it means to be a man or a woman, or I'm merely observing what it feels like for some today. And I suppose what I'm doing is exploring the internal weather, the interior weather of a person caught between the past and the future by sharing a felt landscape, not pushing an agenda, but to actually make space for everyone, not just men, to reflect on identity, to reflect on the loss of identity. So maybe it's not about masculinity, but maybe it's about the orientation, disorientation, even the emotional risk and the ache of wanting to belong and needing to belong. So if all you if all you do today is listen, then that's more than enough. That's all I can ever ask for. This has been the Hurt Lab. My name has been Naveen. My name is Naveen, and it still is Naveen. Um, and be kind to your hurt, because it may be telling you something about your heart. In the meantime, keep the faith, keep the heart. Much love and light. Talk to you soon.